We bid you welcome. We do not ask what you believe or expect you to think in a certain way, but only that you try to live a kindly, helpful life with the dignity proper to a human being. Welcome all who believe that religion is wider than any sect and deeper than any set of opinions. Welcome all who might find in our friendship strength and encouragement for daily living. Good morning, and welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Farmington. My name is Beverly Church, and I'm Secretary of the Executive Board and also a member of the Religious Education Committee. Our minister, Reverend Glenn Farley, is out of the pulpit today, and we're fortunate to have Rabbi Daniel Schwartz with us today, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him shortly. I'd like to extend a special welcome to any visitors today. After the service, we invite you to gather at the back of the meeting house. While indoors, we are observing COVID precautions and wearing masks regardless of vaccination status. Religious education classes are being held in the social hall during the service. An usher can direct you to that location if needed. Joys and sorrows can be shared later in the service after the offering. If you're uncomfortable sharing at the microphone, we have blue Joys and Sorrows cards that are now in the pews for easy access. These cards can be filled out and given to the ushers as they pass by with the offertory plates and read later in the service. If you'd like to text your joys and sorrows, please see my phone number, which is listed on page 2 of the order of service. If you want your name to be read, you can include it in the text message in case I don't have your number programmed in my phone. As we begin our service, we remember that our UU principles begin with our pledge to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome into our community people of all races, sexual orientations, gender identities, and belief systems. At this time, we'll have announcements, and the first one I have is we need volunteers for religious education classes in March, and if you haven't done it yet, it's really a lot of fun to spend time with the kids, and we give you, the Religious Education Committee will give you all the materials that you need to conduct the class, or you're welcome if you have a particular, something in particular that you'd like to share, you're welcome to do that too. So our president, Liz Knight, is going to pass around clipboards, and so if you can, please add your name. We'd appreciate it. And Yvonne, I think you have an announcement.
Good morning. My name's Yvonne, and I'm with the Social Justice Committee, and I want to thank everybody that's been signing letters the last couple weeks in support of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And I just want to let you know that we've had 5 of our reps in the U.S. House sign on to that letter so far, including the 2 that are represent most of the people in the congregation. So today, Social Justice, we're going to have a new letter, and it's in support of the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. So last year, in one of the rescue bills, there was an expansion of the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, and the expansion of the child tax credit cut child poverty in the U.S. in half. But that ended. And so these are letters to our senators because the House passed a bill last year to make it permanent, but the Senate hasn't done anything yet. So this is just to our senators to encourage them to make sure to pass this as well, because it'll help children in Michigan and all over our country. So thank you. The table is, probably a lot of people know, the table will be outside of the RE office after the service. And you're welcome to stop by and sign letters. Thank you.
Are there any other announcements? Please check the UUCF Farmington website or eBlast for other announcements about upcoming events. And please take a moment to silence your phone. Please join me in a shared affirmation of our mission, which is on page 2 of your order of service. We seek answers everywhere, include everyone, live with compassion. For our chalice lighting, comes from Ben Sewell of the First UU of Lexington, Massachusetts. Let us hold a quiet moment together as our chalice is lit. As the wild wind bites, so does the still flame warm us. As the deep snow blocks our doors, so does the gentle flame bring us out. As the crackling cold air stops our breath, so does the radiant flame draw from us the words that we need to give and to receive. Words of greeting, words of comfort, words of solace, words to challenge our minds, and words to bring us to action. Let us gaze upon this, our common flame, so that we remember who we are and what we can do when we're together. Our opening hymn is number 1011 in the teal hymnal. You have one, okay. 1011. And we're going to, you'll see that there are 4 lines there. We're going to sing the first 2 lines twice, then the second 2 lines twice, and then the first 2 lines twice again. Okay? For Rabbi Daniel Schwartz of Temple Shir Shalom in West Bloomfield, being part of the Jewish community is about sharing a set of values and cultural experiences, making the world a better place, participating in Jewish communal life, commemorating events, and celebrating Jewish holidays. It's also about being a mensch, a person with integrity and a good heart, and looking at our lives, relationships, and daily decisions through a Jewish lens. Rabbi Daniel views it as a privilege to partner with members of the community as he shares this meaningful way of life and brings beauty and understanding to their rituals and traditions. A native of St. Louis, Rabbi Schwartz continued to strengthen his Jewish foundation at U.R.J. Goldman Union Camp, Oberlin College, and Hebrew Union College, along with a number of other congregations where he taught or served as student rabbi or rabbinic intern. When not spending time with his temple family, Rabbi Daniel enjoys spending time with his wife, Alana, and their 3 children. Please welcome Rabbi Schwartz.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Church, for the lovely introduction and being our service leader today. And a special thank you to our friend, Tom Bjorkland, who made the connection for me with Reverend Farley to be able to have the opportunity to speak and share with you today. As Reverend Farley and I were communicating with each other, I looked at your website as you asked about different topics that I might be able to share and teach about. And I noticed that you had a social justice committee, social action committee, and suggested a topic which is today's theme, which is social action from a Jewish perspective. I can see the social action committee is seated on your left side over here. I'm very excited about that on the website. And it's great to see the projects that you're doing, as Yvonne shared, the letters to members, our representatives, but also that I saw for alternatives for girls, and the Ruth Ellis Center collecting different things that they're able to use as well. So it's a great tradition, and we have that tradition as well in the Jewish community, and I'm going to share a little bit about where that came from today. Judaism actually is rooted, as we look at our tradition, in making our world a better place. We find it in a variety of different sources, and I've prepared some handouts. Hopefully everybody that's here in person was able to pick one up, because I'll go through some of those, and for those of you that are watching on Facebook or online, I apologize that I didn't share a digital copy for you to be able to see as well. But I thought I would go through some of those traditions that we have and talk about where in the Jewish community we find those, and a little bit about that, because we're known in the Jewish community as the people of the book. But we have a number of books, and I'll share some of those with you as we go through today. So the first place that we really see this idea of social action, justice, it really comes down to the Torah. And our tradition is that God gave to Moses the Torah at Mount Sinai, and that Moses came down with a set of laws, instructions, 10 commandments, but really all of the laws that we were to follow there. And as Moses brought those down, it became the tradition that was a written tradition that we had, but there also continued to be an oral tradition that was shared, which later was codified, it was written down and codified in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries of the Common Era, and I'll get to some of those in a moment. But first, we go back to Torah, which is thousands of years old. And the Hebrew Bible, the first section of it is Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And if we were to take it and unroll our Torah scroll so that we could go across and find the exact center of the Torah, we would find the first verse that I put on your pages before you, which comes from the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 18, the second half of it, where it says, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, ani Adonai. Love your neighbor as yourself, because I am the Lord your God. This passage is special for us in the Jewish community, and in some traditions, in the Orthodox community especially, this is a section that's known as the Holiness Code, which is the first thing that they teach to their children. The idea within it is these are the things in the Jewish community that we needed to do in order to be a holy people. What does it mean to be a holy people? It means that we were distinct, we were separate, we were different, that we had whether it's a different destiny or maybe not destiny, but obligations that we were to share and that we were responsible for that made us holy, just like God was holy. And so each of these instructions that we're given is followed by, do this because God said so, because I'm the Lord your God. And so this idea of loving your neighbor as yourself is that first really insight that we have into looking and understanding what we're supposed to do. And as we look at our world and the challenges that we face within it, loving our neighbor as ourselves, it ties into what Hillel 2,000 years ago, a famous rabbi, said is really the essence of Judaism. That there was somebody that was interested in converting that came to Hillel and said to him, if you can teach me the entirety of Torah, the 5 books of Moses, while I stand on one foot, then I'll convert and I'll become Jewish. You're laughing because you know it's huge, it's a lot. And so Hillel said, okay. He stood on one foot. He said, that which is hurtful to you, do not do to others. The rest is commentary, now go and study. And really, that's what this verse is about as well. Hillel's statement, which is that which is hurtful to you, do not do to others. This statement that we have from God in the book of Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself. It was the idea of really what we call today the golden rule, doing unto others as you'd want to have done unto you. And it was making sure that if you were in need, you hope that somebody would look out for you as well. So some look at that statement from Hillel, which is connected to this verse as well, and say that's the essence of Judaism. That's what it's all about. Others will look at this next verse, which comes from the next section of the Hebrew Bible, from the prophet section, from the prophet Micah, which said, God has told to you, O man, what is good, and what does God require of you? To do justice, to love goodness, and to walk humbly with your God. And I'll share with you, normally in some of our translations, you'll see that I made them gender neutral. As we're looking at it, we know that thousands of years ago, they didn't do that in Torah. There's a lot of masculine language that we have in here. But some words like Adam, you could translate as humanity, but here I left it in the original, where it's translated as O man. But the idea of that was that some people will look at that, and we actually have these verses are actually on the wall in the sanctuary at Temple Shir Shalom because we see them as our mission statement as well, to do justice, to love goodness, and to walk humbly with God. And so what does it mean? What do those verses mean? And Torah commentary, I could go on for probably another hour just looking at those verses. But I'm limited on time, and I put a lot in here, so I want to make sure we get to some of those things too. But I'll just give you the last verse of it, to walk humbly with God. If I were to ask you, what does that mean? Does anybody want to take a chance? What does it mean to you to walk humbly, to walk modestly with God? Yes?
To listen to the still little voice within yourself.
Excellent. To listen to that still, small voice within. To listen to God. Other ideas, thank you. Thanks for being brave. Being the first. To walk humbly with God. I'll give you more chances in a moment then. So, Jewish tradition looks at it and we say it means it can be a number of things, but one of the interpretations of it is that it means that we're supposed to mimic what God does. That in the Torah, at the very end of it, we read that God buries Moses, and so we too are supposed to bury our loved ones. It's actually considered what's known as a chesed shel emet, a true act of kindness, because there's nothing that the person that we're burying can do in return for us, but that we do that out of true kindness for them. I think it's also a hope one day that somebody will be there to do it for us. But that's one of the ways to walk humbly in God's ways. Another one is to clothe the naked, or to free the captive. So anything that we read in Torah that God did for humanity that we're able to do as well, that's what the rabbis interpreted it meant, to walk humbly with God. And so just as God looked after the humanity, we were supposed to be able to do the same. Which leads us to that next verse, which is from the third section of the Hebrew Bible, from the writing section, from a book known as Ruth. And this is a book that's actually traditionally read on a holiday for us known as Shavuot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, as it's known by some. And the book is read because on that day, it's traditionally the day that we understood that Moses handed the 10 Commandments, the law, the instruction to the people at Mount Sinai. And so Ruth, who is the first person to choose Judaism, to choose a Jewish life, takes on that yoke of responsibility of following those commandments as well as she marries into this family. And we see through her actions as well as she goes back. The story is that Ruth was a Moabite woman who married a man whose mother was Naomi. And Naomi had another son, and that son married another Moabite woman by the name of Orpah. And both Naomi's sons died. And not having any other children and not having had children themselves, Naomi said to Orpah and to Ruth, go back to your native land, go back to your father's homes, you'll remarry, you're young, you'll be taken care of. I can't provide for you, I can't give you anything. So Orpah said, okay, and she went back. And Ruth said, no, wherever you go, I will go, your people will be my people, your God is my God, wherever you dwell, I will dwell. And that's why she's considered the first person to choose Judaism. So she went back with Naomi to her land. And she didn't have any property, she didn't have anything. And so there is a tradition in the ancient Near East, but among the Israelite community, that two things would happen that are described in the book of Ruth. One is the corners of the fields were left, that those who were harvesting wouldn't touch the corners of the field because it allowed for others who had a need to be able to go and harvest for themselves. So it wasn't just, in a sense, handing them food, but it was allowing them to have the dignity of being able to go and pick it for themselves and the things that they would need. The other tradition was something that was known as gleaning. Anybody know what gleaning is? Yes.
If you were poor, landowners would invite you to come onto their land and take the wheat that was passed over by the harvesters.
Thank you. So, if you couldn't hear, because it's the microphone here for anybody watching online as well, if you had a need, landowners invited you onto their land, and as their harvesters went through and picked wheat or whatever it was, anything that was left behind, somebody that was gleaning would be able to take it, would be able to harvest it and use it for their personal use. Not to go out and sell, but for their personal consumption as they went through. And so that's what this text with Ruth is talking about here, that Boaz is the landowner who happened to be a distant relative of Naomi, who saw this woman who is out in the field gleaning, picking up the things that were left behind. And he actually said, after he learned her story and what was going on, that she was not only feeding herself but her mother-in-law, he told his harvesters, leave a little bit more on there. Drop a little bit more as you're harvesting, so that it made it easier for Naomi to be able to glean and to take food back for her and her family as they were doing that. So here we have an example of Jewish tradition, Torah, God teaching us of what we're supposed to do for those who are in need, that have a need for food, that we allow them to have the dignity of picking their own food, and when they have a need for it, as Ruth did, making sure that it was provided for them so that they wouldn't go hungry. That tradition we see in a number of different places as well. And throughout Torah, throughout the writings, throughout the prophets, there are three groups that are often referred to that were allowed to glean or that were supposed to benefit from some of these practices. The poor, the widow, and the stranger. Why those three groups? And it was the idea that all three of them, in a sense, didn't have a support system. The widow doesn't have a spouse that would be taking care of them. The stranger they're from another place. They don't have family that was there to take care of them. I said poor before, but I meant the orphan, the widow, and the stranger. And the orphan was the other one because they didn't have parents that would take care of them. So the orphan, the widow, and the stranger, in a sense, were a protected class that they said, let's make sure that we're always taking care of their needs and they have what they're going to need. And so time after time, we see that throughout the Hebrew Bible as it's described, and that really gives us that first insight into our responsibilities as a Jewish community of social action and our responsibilities to taking care of those who are more vulnerable. Next, we get into the oral Torah, known as the Talmud. Talmud is made up of a number of different parts, something called Mishnah and Gemara that are talked about, but I have a Mishnah here that I've shared for you from a tractate known as Shabbat, the Day of Rest, that talks about when somebody dies and they're brought to their judgment before the heavenly court. They're going to be asked 4 questions. There are actually 6 on here, but I put 4 on there for you, of their lives and how they lived. Number 1, did you conduct your business affairs honestly? Were you honest in your business practices? Number 2, did you designate regular times for Torah study? Number 3, did you engage in procreation? Did you have children or try to? And number 4, and that's the part it's tied to and for us for social action, is did you look forward to the world's redemption? So what does that mean in that sense of looking forward to the world's redemption? It wasn't just saying, okay, I'm going to sit back because Judaism believes in either a personal Messiah or a messianic age that's going to come. And that messianic age is described as, in a sense for us, returning to the Garden of Eden, where everyone's needs are met, we're all taken care of, and we're living in paradise. And that 4th question of did you look forward to the world's redemption is understood as, did you also work towards it? Did you do something in order to bring about that Messianic age, in order to bring about a personal Messiah that would come? And so we see that, and we know that if you're working towards it, it means that everyone's needs are going to be met. That there's stories of the prophet Elijah for us that we're told. Elijah the prophet is the only one who never died, that he went up into the heavens in a chariot of fire. And because of that, Elijah is the one that comes back and disguises himself and tests the world to see if we're ready for a personal Messiah or a Messianic age to arrive. That he'll dress up as a beggar and see how people treat him. And if his needs are taken care of, then he'll announce the coming of a Messianic age. But if they're not, then he returns and comes back another time to see. He says the world needs a little bit more work as we're doing that. And that was that idea of this tractate in Talmud as we read it, that we have a responsibility, that we have an obligation to work towards bringing about that Messianic age, that we're partners with God as we do that. And we see that in this next thought, that's rabbinic thought as we're going through. So now we're moving forward in time a little bit. We're moving to somewhere around the 6th, 7th, 8th century to something known as Kohelet Rabbah. Kohelet is the book of Ecclesiastes, and the Rabbah means it's midrash. It's rabbinic writings looking at each verse of the book of Ecclesiastes and coming up and expanding on the ideas that are put within it. The idea is that in all of these, in the entirety of the Bible, there's only enough space to include certain details, but the rabbis then get to fill in some of those details as they describe that too. And so here we see that. And read, when the Blessed Holy One created the first human, God took him and led him round all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, "Look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are, and all that I have created. It was for you that I created it. Pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world. If you corrupt it, there is no one to repair it after you." So here the idea is God is telling us in this oral Torah that we have a responsibility to take care of our world, that we're the guardians, that we take care of, and we see this with the story of Noah as well, the story of Noah and the flood. The humanity was there to take care of the world and make sure that it was maintained, all the animals, the vegetation, and everything else, that it's our responsibility to take care of it. And the rabbis here are saying that all the more so because there's nobody else that's going to do it. God has put us in charge, and it's our responsibility to take care of it. Isaac Luria is a rabbi, a mystical rabbi from the 16th century, from the 1500s, that was a mystical mystic. And he came up with a concept that you'll hear a lot more in the Jewish community referred to as tikkun olam. Tikkun means to repair, olam means the world. And Luria, his description was that there was a time period when, since God is everything, that God had to make room to create the world, the universe, everything around him. So God, kind of like if you're passing somebody in the hall and it's a tight, narrow hallway as you go in, you kind of suck in a little bit and you kind of pass over. That's what Luria described. He said God did what was known as tzimtzum. God sucked in, made space for the world to be created. And that when God created the world, some will say that God created it perfectly. Some will say, and Luria talks about it eventually being not perfect, but that our responsibility becomes to repair the world, to partner with God, and to make our world a perfect place. And so in Jewish tradition, oftentimes you hear the word tikkun olam is referring to that idea of social action for us, of our responsibility, our obligation to repair the world. So we see that in rabbinic texts, we see that in modern texts, contemporary texts. We at Temple, Shir Shalom, every year we have something known as our Tikkun Olamathon. It's a marathon of doing Tikkun Olam. We don't run as we're going through, but we just did this. We usually do it over Martin Luther King Day weekend, and we had 300 volunteers that come out and volunteer with different partner organizations around town. So Alternatives for Girls that you guys are helping was one of those organizations that we've helped in the past as well. As we do things. But it's that idea of constantly making sure that we're thinking about what's wrong in our world and our responsibility, our obligation to be able to fix it. And our holidays, which is on the next page, you see is a constant reminder for us as well. So I put two pictures of two different holidays that we have. The first one is a hut known as a sukkah. It's a holiday that comes in the fall. It's a harvest festival known as Sukkot. And all of what are known as the pilgrimage festivals in which Israelites have 2,000 years ago would bring their offerings to the temple 3 times a year. They were known as those pilgrimage festivals because they would walk there. Sukkot is one of them. And so each of them has an agricultural connection and a historical connection. The historical connection being that as we made our way from Egypt and slavery, that we lived inside of these huts for 40 years as we made our way to the promised land of Israel. But the agricultural connection is that there's the fall harvest festival, and that farmers would go and they would live inside these huts next to their fields so they wouldn't waste time in the morning getting up because their fields weren't always right next to their home, and they would live in them. Today, the tradition is that we're commanded to dwell inside of these for 7 days, that we live inside them. So the only thing that we traditionally wouldn't do would be to go to use the restroom and cook in them. But we would eat meals in them, people sleep in them, people entertain, we invite guests into them, and we do everything that we can inside of that sukkah. The weather here in Michigan doesn't always cooperate with that, so the idea was that you can take a bite of food and then go inside if it's raining or really cold, and it's as if you've dwelled inside the sukkah as well. But the roof of the sukkah is what I want to bring up for a moment, because it's made of leaves from trees, branches of trees that have been taken down. And so if you are inside of your sukkah and you look up at night, you can see the stars in the sky. It also means that if it's a cloudy day and it's raining, it's going to fall right upon you. It's not completely surrounded. You'll see this one has 3.5 walls that are there. A sukkah never has 4 walls. Always has a doorway that's open. Sometimes it's 3 walls, 2.5 walls, 4 walls as you go through. But it was the idea that you're experiencing the elements that are around you. And so for us on Sukkot, one of the messages that we take away from it is that oftentimes we're blessed to have a roof over our heads throughout the year. But there are some people who are experiencing, like we do on Sukkot, all of the elements year-round, that don't have a roof over their heads to protect them, that are homeless. And so we dwell inside these Sukkot as that reminder for us as well of the festivals that we celebrate, but as a reminder that there are people who need us to be able to help them. And that social action idea of social justice, of making sure that we're working with partners and organizations that are going to help provide a roof over somebody's head, or warming stations, or whatever it might be that someone needs at this time. The second image that you have there is a piece of matzah, or 2 pieces of matzah from our spring festival, known as Passover. And the other name for matzah, which is something that we're commanded to consume on that holiday, is that it's known as lechem oniyah, the bread of affliction, or the bread of the poor. It has no taste. It's flour and water that has to be mixed and completely baked within 18 minutes in order to be kosher or fit for use for Passover. It's tasteless. So usually people, other than my dad, who has a box of it next to his desk, people don't say the rest of the year, I want to eat this because it's really good. Some reason he does. He puts something on it, though. So, but it's supposed to be the bread of affliction to remind us that on this night when we have this festive meal, that sometimes this is all that people have, or they don't even have that. And so it's our responsibility throughout the year to be able to provide food for them. So that reminder for us. And not only that, one of the verses that we read during this service that happens around our dinner tables is the verse that you read there from the Passover Seder. It says, "Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are needy come and celebrate Passover." And the tradition on this festival is that we are to invite others into our homes to be able to celebrate this special day with us, especially if we know that somebody has a need, that they can come in and be a part of it with us as well. The last section in terms of text that I want to share with you is from our prayer book. And these next few verses are actually words that we read as part of our morning liturgy for those that are doing a morning service every day, that would be part of our morning service every day. There are something that are known as Pesukei de Zimra, or psalms of praise, poems of praise, and Birkat HaShachar, the blessings of the morning, and this comes from those sections. It says, "These are the obligations in life which have no bounds. They are the responsibilities in which we must participate if we are to enjoy the fruits of this world and any world to come. Performing acts of love and kindness, engaging in deeds of compassion." Those are the 2 that highlight for the social action for us, but there's more to here. "Arriving early for study, welcoming guests, visiting the sick, celebrating with the wedding couple, honoring our parents, consoling the bereaved, being devoted to prayer, achieving peace where there is strife. But the study of Torah is equal to them all because it leads to them all." And so even in our liturgy, in our daily liturgy, is that reminder of the kindness, the goodness, the compassion that we're supposed to bring into our world as well. So how does this, those are all some of the texts, I should say, just a few that I prepared for this morning that come from our tradition about how we're supposed to act and what we're supposed to do. How do we put that into work? As I mentioned before, we have, at our synagogue, we have that Tikkun Olamathon, that day of service, but the idea is that every day we're supposed to do something, and really that's supposed to be the start for us of a way of engaging and connecting people with different organizations that they can partner with throughout the year and learn about as well. So we have different speakers that come in and share about their organization. This year we had somebody from Detroit Dog Rescue that talked about how she got that organization off the ground, and then people made things for Detroit Dog Rescue and 9 other organizations as they did that. We have the Reform movement, the Reform branch of Judaism, has a lobbying arm in Washington, D.C., and it's called the RAC, or the Religious Action Center. And so we have representatives that are there that are lobbying our representatives. And I took 3 different issues that if you were to go to their website and you would be able to see, like, here's what Reform Judaism believes in, and here's why. So racial justice. We look at that and we can find from the prophet Malachi, the quote, "Have we not all one Father? Did not one God create us?" So the idea for Malachi was talking about the equality of human beings. And we see that expanded upon in the Midrash as well, where we're told that the reason that God created one human being to start with Adam, was that nobody could say that they were better than anybody else, that we all were descendants of Adam from that first human being. So from that, we then build around that the idea of racial equality and racial justice and work towards that. And that's what some of the things that they're working towards. Economic justice, any of those examples that I shared with you before, but there's also one from here from the book of Exodus, just that reminder that we were once enslaved in Egypt, and so it's our responsibility to make sure that we bring freedom to others who are enslaved in our world today. Reproductive rights, another quality that's important to us as Reform Jews, another idea that's important to us, comes to us from the book of Exodus. And here I give the quote where it talks about the status of a fetus. And that for Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox Judaism, that until a baby is born, it doesn't have the value of a human life yet. It's still the status of a fetus, which allows for abortions, but also for different care that's needed for family, and the mother who is carrying the fetus to have the priority in terms of life and medical responses that are taken care of in a hospital, or decisions that need to be made, as opposed to the fetus having equal status with the mother as well. There are many other issues that are on there, and so I go back to a quote from Pirkei Avot, which comes from the Talmud as well, where Rabbi Tarfon says, "It's not your duty to finish the work, but you are not at liberty to neglect it." So the idea is when we see a challenge in our world, most of us can look at it and say, you know what, I'm never going to solve this. But we still have to do something. We have to say, what's one thing that I'm going to do that's going to help make this situation a little bit better? And that's the command, the obligations that we have in the Jewish communities that we see that. And I'll end today with just a blessing that we share every Sunday morning with our religious school students. We say these words, and we actually put it to a fun tune. Dan Nichols, if you look it up, it's called the Nana song, or the Litakain song. As you go through, our kids have our hands in the air and waving them and clapping and doing different things. But we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shenatan lanu hizdamnu letakein het haolam, which means, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us the opportunity to mend our world. And the idea is that every single day, each one of us, whether we're Jewish or not, has the opportunity to fix our world and to do the social justice work that you all are doing, and to continue that and make our world a better place. Thank you.
To speak about prayer is indeed presumptuous. There are no devices, no techniques. There is no specialized art of prayer. All of life must be a training to pray. We pray the way we live. We'll now have a moment of silence. As we take the offering this morning, we acknowledge the generosity and intention to support and build this welcoming community. If you're visiting us for the first time and you're comfortable doing so, please stand and tell us where you're from and how you heard about us. We'd like to meet you. Anyone here for the first time? Okay. A perfect heart is one that has known love and loss, joy and sorrow. The perfect heart is one that has been shared. As joys and sorrows of our community are shared, please direct your energy, prayers, and meditations as a gift of compassion and strength. I would extinguish the chalice, but it seems to have extinguished itself. So our closing hymn is number 123, Spirit of Life. It is in this hymn. Thank you. That concludes our service. Thank you to Rabbi Schwartz and to Diana for the music today.